infighting, if you will, within the conservative movement, and a couple, several online influencers, for lack of a better word, have been, whether it's Candace Owens coming up with all these crazy conspiracies about Charlie Kirk and how he died, or whether it's Tucker Carlson really making light of Nazism and platforming people who have very, very abhorrent views, and not just platforming and interviewing, but refusing to ask hard questions. All of this kind of infighting over the last few months in the conservative movement has been really dividing and really problematic for the conservative movement. Vice President Vance was questioned on this, and he didn't really name names, but he did talk about how we do have a common enemy, and we do need to focus on that common enemy. Let's listen to clip one.
We have to remember that we have a lot more in common than we do not in common, and that the disagreements that animate the Republican Party, while they matter and they're important, I think these debates should happen. They should happen in podcasts. They should happen in the media. They should happen on the op-ed pages. It's totally reasonable for the people who make up this coalition to argue about what our foreign policy should be, what our specific tax policy should be, what our housing policy should be. I mean, I had a meeting just yesterday that was focused in the West Wing about how do we get housing more affordable for young Americans, because all the things that got completely out of control under the Biden administration, you had homes that doubled or tripled in price depending on the geography in 4 years under the Biden administration. We got to solve a problem for our young people so they can afford to buy homes, start families, and actually build their own American dream. So I think my attitude is let these debates play out, but don't let the debates that we're having internally blind us to the fact that we're up against a radical leftist movement that murdered my friend a couple of months ago, and that would throw many people in the Trump administration in prison, not for doing anything illegal, but for not following the far left's agenda. That is the real opponent here, a political movement in this country that has no animating principle, that has no agenda for the American people. Their sole obsession is to take down Donald Trump and anybody who helped Donald Trump govern. Focus on the enemy, have our debates, but focus on the enemy so that we can win victories that matter for the American people. That's my message.
Oh, there you have it. Probably something there that not many of you disagree with. He's exactly right. The vice president is exactly right. He does a very good job articulating the issues of the day and speaking on behalf of the administration. And there are so many problems to be solved out there. There shouldn't be really much time for infighting within the conservative movement. There's so many common problems that we all agree on that need to be fixed. That's what we need to focus on. And these last, let's say, 12 to 14 months before, at this point, really less than 12 months before the midterms, but let's just say 12 to 14 months before January of next year, actually January of 27, which is when the new Congress will be sworn in. This is the opportunity, generational opportunity, over the next 12 to 13 months for Congress and the White House to get on their A game and get stuff done. And to me, that's the message that should be happening with urgency here, is that who knows what's going to happen during the midterms. Wishful thinking is that conservatives retain the House and the Senate, but who knows what's going to happen? Only time will tell. But right now, Republicans have the trifecta. They need to be doing more legislatively. I mean, there are zero excuses as to why the House and the Senate aren't pushing more through. And this is the fundamental problem with the filibuster, which is really a fake filibuster when you look at the history, because it's not a true filibuster. And those who know about this topic or have studied it or want to look into it, read into the filibuster rule and how this came about. But this whole notion that the majority can really only get through their wish list items once a year through reconciliation, and even that tool has limitations. This is fundamentally at odds with our Constitution and our system of government. And here's what I mean by that. When our founding fathers drafted our founding documents and outlined what Congress would look like and how it would function, There were only a handful of items in which you needed more than a simple majority, specifically impeachment. Impeachment, you need 2/3. All right. When you look at a constitutional amendment, I think you also need 2/3. All right. Especially 2/3 of the states for sure. But nonetheless, if our founding fathers intended for the legislative branch, the House and the Senate, to need 60 plus votes on every single occasion, don't you think they would have outlined that? Don't you think they would have outlined that in the founding document? But they didn't. All right. So our founders intended for the legislative branch, in order to pass law, in order to pass legislation to be signed by the president, the founding fathers intended for a simple majority to be needed. You need 51 votes in the Senate, and you need somewhere in the ballpark of 218, roughly, votes in the House of Representatives. And this notion that you've got to have 60 plus votes to pass anything through the Senate is really extra constitutional, and it's nowhere to be found in our founding documents or any writings of our founding fathers. The impeachment tool is what needs 2/3. Our founders specifically outlined that. But legislation, everyday legislation, including budgets, should only need 51% of the vote in the House and the Senate. And so we have this fake filibuster that jams everything up in the Senate. And the argument on the conservative side is, well, if we get rid of the filibuster, then the Democrats will pass crazy legislation. Okay. Well, I'm not going to deny that. That's probably true. If the Democrats are in charge, they probably will pass crazy legislation. But my point is, let them do it. Let the legislative branch go crazy, if you will, and let the voters respond. Let's see how the voters like that. Now, to the contrary, let's let conservatives and Republicans pass good legislation, and then let's see how the voters respond to that. Let's let the system play out. Let's let the system work. But this boogeyman that the Democrats are going to do bad stuff if they're in charge, folks, they're already doing bad stuff. I mean, President Biden and the Democrats did some horrendous things. And so we've got to stop playing defense. We've got to start learning how to play offense. And this filibuster preventing us from doing monumental generational things legislatively is just very, very problematic. And if you take out the legislative branch and all it is who's in the White House, then we're going to do this back and forth of executive orders. We need consistent, sound policy nationwide done through the legislative branch. That's how you win.
Hey everybody, it's Chad with the band Unspoken. I've seen firsthand how powerful it is when the church comes together, and that's exactly what Redeem Health Share is all about. With rising medical costs, Redeem offers a more affordable way to care for your family. Their flexible programs are designed to fit your budget without sacrificing your values. Each month, members contribute a share amount to help pay each other's medical bills, and you choose the providers and the treatments that are right for your family. It's not just about the money, it's about community. Redeem Health Share is rooted in biblical principles. So whether it's a routine visit or sudden emergency, there's a caring Christian community walking with you every step of the way. This time of the year is a great reminder to make choices that reflect our faith. So if you're looking for another way forward, one that reflects your faith, this is it. Call 844-REDEEM-0 today. Join the movement, share joyfully, and live redeemed.
This is Abraham Hamilton III with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
Abraham, I'm coming to you and your wonderful listeners today with a very special request for the month of December. And I'm remembering John 1, where the apostle writes, "The word became flesh and dwelt among us. The light has shone in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And yet, would you know, in the regions of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, as many as 9 of 10 new believers have never read that scripture in their own Bible because they do not own one.
Everyone wants to read the Bible, but many of them will be sharing the single Bible
Pastor Carlo there in the Andes Mountains will tell us that Christians are so desperate to grow in the grace and knowledge of Jesus, they are willing to share a Bible. This December, we want to bless 7,000 Bibleless believers so this year they can read for themselves the true Christmas story. So would you get involved today, Abraham?
$5 sends a Bible. $100 sends 20. $500 sends 100. Give by calling 800-YES-WORD. 800-YES-WORD. Or visit sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. A vacation with a purpose. That's what we call our tours here at American Family Radio, American Family Association, because we go and we see and we do, and we have great fellowship and fun and food, but we also have a purpose in visiting the places we go to, a spiritual purpose, a historical purpose, and that's going to include our tours in 2026. Here are the tours. We're going to Washington, D.C. We're going to George Washington's Mount Vernon. We're going to Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. We're going to Boston, Massachusetts. So if you want information on any of those tours for 2026, the dates, the prices, the itinerary, go to this website, wildmangroup.com, WILDMON group.com, and we hope to see you on one of our 2026 Spiritual Heritage Tours.
At the Core podcasts are available at AFR.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Core here on American Family Radio. Well, as you just heard my dad mention, our 2026 tours are open, and they're for you to register over at wildmangroup.com. We're going to be going to Boston again, and we're going to be going to Washington, Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. So you can go to wildmangroup.com to check out those dates and all the information you need on those spiritual heritage tours. I do want to introduce our next guest. Matt Sharp is with us. Matt Sharp is Senior Counsel and Director at the Center for Public Policy over at the Alliance Defending Freedom, otherwise known as ADF. And Matt is with us now to talk about some of these cases that have been heard or will be heard at the Supreme Court. Hey, Matt, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, Matt, we appreciate the work of ADF. We've been partners with you guys for a long time, probably since the very beginning, to be technical. But Matt, tell us, well, there's it seems like every year there's major cases that the Supreme Court hears, just because they're oftentimes a final say, if you will, on a lot of legal questions and constitutional questions. But give us a kind of a brief rundown of some of the things that the Supreme Court has heard or will be hearing very soon this term.
Yeah. So kind of three big issues I wanted to focus on. The first one was a case that was argued earlier this fall in October. This was a case of Kaylee Childs. At its heart was a Colorado law that censored counselors like Kaylee Childs from being able to help kids that are dealing with questions or confusions about their gender, their identity. And under Colorado law, counselors are told you can't help a kid reconcile their feelings with their biological sex. You can't help a child find comfort and solace in who God created them to be. Well, that's a dangerous path, because we know when counselors aren't able to help kids in that regard, those kids ended up getting pushed towards these dangerous puberty blockers, hormones, even sterilizing surgeries. And Kaylee is wanting to be able to help children avoid that path and rather go down a path that helps them find comfort with their biological sex. And so we challenged that law, saying that it violates Kaylee's and her clients' free speech rights, their ability to have conversations, to be able to walk down this path together. Instead, Colorado is inserting itself into those private conversations between a counselor and their client, and ultimately telling Kaylee what she can and cannot say. And that's something our First Amendment does not allow. It doesn't allow the government to come in and tell people, this is what you can say, this is what you can't say, especially when we're dealing with important issues like your identity and your biological sex and these things that are really important to helping children grow and thrive. So we were excited to challenge that law. This is something that I think about 20 states have passed similar laws. So a victory for Kaylee would be a victory not just for her, not just a victory for counselors in Colorado, but across the country. Many counselors that are feeling censored and silenced by laws like this that interfere with their ability to help kids and families.
Matt, before we move on to the other two, I gotta ask, or gotta make a point and then kind of ask a question. This is, by the way, I didn't know it was 20. That's quite astonishing that have passed this law or similar, kind of basically targeting faith-based counselors is the essence of it. What's so ironic, Matt, is that these laws are narrowly tailored basically to target faith-based counselors. And what I mean by that is, in these statutes, very few, if any of them, probably none of them actually, say something to the extent of, if someone is embracing their natural biology and their you can't counsel them towards homosexuality or transgenderism. Like, this is only a one-sided thing, meaning you can't counsel them towards their natural biology, how God created them. But if maybe you want to kind of push them in the direction of transgenderism and homosexuality, well, that's completely fine. It's just if you teach them to embrace how they're created biologically and through God's creation, well, you can't do that. And so these statutes are one-sided, which fundamentally is the problem with trying to regulate the speech of and the convictions in many cases of counselors. I mean, this is just an impossible thing that the government's trying to balance out and target.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So imagine this hypothetical: a child and their family walks in and says, I'm struggling with these confusions about my biological sex. I want to embrace my gender identity. I was born in the wrong body. I'm not really a male. I want to be a female. Under Colorado law, the counselor can say, yes, let's work on that. I will help affirm your gender identity and reject your biological sex. But if that same child said, I've got these confusions, I want to embrace my biological sex, I want to find comfort, Colorado law tells Kaylee and counselors like her, no, you cannot help them with that. Exactly like you said, that is viewpoint discrimination. You're saying path A is fine, path B is not. And that is something our Constitution forbids. The government can't pick and choose and say, you can go down this one path, but not the alternative view. And especially one where many of these children and individuals like Kaylee, it is exactly like you said, motivated by their faith and their belief that God created us male and female, and that our best and brightest future is one that embraces that design.
Yeah, this is it's so dangerous, and it's not just, obviously the rights of Kaylee and other counselors are being infringed upon. That's a problem, but equally a problem is that young people are being victimized by this gender ideology. And what the Colorado government's here saying is, hey, we're not going to send anybody to your rescue. We're not going to let anybody come to your rescue, or at least anybody speak any semblance of sanity and reason to you. Otherwise, bad counselor. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to lose your license. You're going to be fined. From a human standpoint, it's equally egregious to allow people to remain in their confusion. And when they want help, you tell them, no, you can't get help. That's a very heartless thing to do on behalf of the Colorado government. Matt, what are a couple, you mentioned two others, what are a couple of other cases that you guys are working on there?
So one that was just argued last week, this is the case of First Choice Women's Center. It involves a pro-life pregnancy center in New Jersey, and for quite a while has been facing very severe harassment and targeting by the New Jersey Attorney General. That's been basically accusing them of giving misinformation, even went so far as to demand that this pregnancy center hand over the names, phone numbers, and addresses of its donors. We all know where that leads. When the government starts asking, tell us who your donors are, that means they're not only going to go after you, that info is going to be used to dox the people that are supporting the pro-life, pro-woman work of these pregnancy centers. So we were challenging that. We were challenging that harassment by the New Jersey Attorney General, challenging these efforts to out the donors of this incredible ministry and the work that it's doing, and ultimately protect that. Again, this is something that we're seeing many other states try and do these exact same things, these laws that target pregnancy centers, to try and shut them down or silence them or censor them. We've had cases in Vermont and New York going over these exact issues. So once again, when we see cases like this is not just about New Jersey, not just about First Choice, but this is setting these broader principles that government, you can't harass, you can't go after and try and censor and silence pregnancy centers, and you can't require organization ministries like this to hand over all of their donor lists so that you can then harass those individuals supporting the work.
You know, in many cases, we don't even know who's funding the left from a dark money perspective. The left always talks about how the right is engaged in kind of these dark money nonprofit organizations or operations. But in reality, we found this out during the 2020 election. The left moves hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars around through nonprofits. Zuckerberg did this through multiple kind of shell nonprofits to turn out the vote in 2020. And so the left does this, all the same things they accuse us of, they do. But the fact of the matter is that the government doesn't need to know, they have no right to know the individual donors of 501c3 nonprofits. And if they do desire to get that information, the only reason that they're getting it is to target and intimidate those voters and make people think twice, if you will, before they give to conservative or Christian nonprofits. We've had some crazy requests. I'm sure you guys have run into this on the ADF side as well, but we've had, right now we've got one state, I won't mention the state, we've got one state, either the Secretary of State or no, it's the AG. The AG is wanting our specific investment portfolio breakdown. They want an entire 70-page print off of every single company that we own shares in through our investment portfolio, which is like, no, we're not giving you that. We'll give you page 1, right, which tells you the balances. But we're not giving you all 70 pages because it's none of your business. You have no right to know what our investment portfolio is. And so, but there's other cases like that where these AGs or secretaries of state just want to dig and dig and dig. And it's only targeted towards conservative groups. Matt, we've got, let's see, about 5 minutes left. What's this third case you guys have been working on?
Yeah, this one I'm particularly excited about. For years now, we've seen stories of women losing out on championships, on medals, because of policies that allow guys to compete in girls' sports. A lot of this came to head with when Leah Thomas and Mel dominated women's swimming, beating out Riley Gain at the NCAA swimming championships. But this is one of many, many stories like this. In response, we've seen 27 states now pass laws to protect fairness in women's sports. And among the first states were Idaho, which was actually the first state to do it, and West Virginia. Well, immediately after those laws passed, the ACLU comes in and challenges them, saying they're unconstitutional. And so at Alliance Defending Freedom, we've been working with these states to help defend these laws, particularly by intervening on behalf of female athletes, saying these laws are important to me. They make a difference to protect fairness for me. Well, those cases have bubbled up to the Supreme Court. And so this coming January 13th, we're going to have oral argument on both of those laws, where we in the states of Idaho and West Virginia are asking the Supreme Court to uphold these laws and ultimately uphold the laws of 27 states that likewise protect fairness in women's sports. This is going to be huge because this is ultimately getting at the heart of this radical gender ideology that's kind of infected even the Kaylee Childs case we were talking about earlier. Can states recognize that there are differences between men and women and have those differences matter in sports and privacy and other things that ultimately really matter to women and girls? That's what these cases are advocating for, is making sure that gender ideology doesn't erase women and opportunities for women. And in sports, it's women that lose and pay the price.
You know, I don't, it's crazy to think that the Supreme Court is having to decide and really weigh in on topics like this. I mean, in some cases, it's just not good. But I think the Supreme Court, it'll be a missed opportunity if they just don't settle this whole insanity of trying to act like we can change birth certificates and we can check the mailbox when we're not a male, we're just not, and really getting rid of this notion that you can kind of have male and female over here, like on the reality side, which is biology, and then over here you can kind of fudge it a little bit, check a few different boxes, and pretend to be something else. It's just the Supreme Court ultimately needs to put this to rest and just simply say that there are male and female. There is male and female. There's nothing else, and you can't swap back and forth between the two. You just are what you are. This is how you're created from conception, and there's no swapping back and forth or pretending. I think that would be the ultimate victory. Matt, I really would hate to see the Supreme Court try to like split this up and not directly answer the question or create like some accommodations. To me, if this doesn't get really, pushed back far and really corrected, then trying to defend the rights of women and the left will just keep chipping away at the rights. To me, it just seems like a very dangerous path if the Supreme Court doesn't come down pretty serious and hard on this.
Yeah, that's why we're hoping the Supreme Court will come down very strongly to say it is perfectly fine and constitutional to recognize men and women are different, and it impacts so many different areas of life: sports, privacy, identification documents. And that's part of what the states are asking for, is let us recognize these differences, and ultimately even pointing to federal law. Again, Title IX was written to create equal opportunities for women, but the left and the Biden administration and others co-opted it and tried to use it to push this radical gender ideology. So we're hopeful the court will roll all of that back and say, no, Title IX and laws like it recognize that there are two and only two sexes, and that when you allow men and women's sports, you are undermining the purpose of these laws, ignoring reality, and ultimately harming women and girls.
Yeah, absolutely. They need to really get this right, and really recognize what humanity has recognized since the book of Genesis. Hey, Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate y'all's work over at ADF. Tell our folks where they can read more about your work.
Sure. They can visit us online at adflegal.org. That's adflegal.org. They can learn about the cases I've just talked about, Childs, First Choice,